Welcome to the first Chicago Lightworks sponsored roundtable discussion, dimming contactors and time clocks. Oh my. My name is Jim Westerfield and I'll be your MC today. Joining me in the discussion is Deborah Stamoclair, PELC, Lighting Studio Manager at Premier Engineers, David Janney, Vice President and Principal of Millie's Engineering Group, Steve Wirima, CRT Team Leader for Continental Electrical Construction Company, and finally, Brian Coddington, Lighting Controls Guru Extraordinaire for Chicago Lightworks. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. And thank you to all the attendees that are in listen-only mode. If you have questions during the proceedings, please use the chat option and your questions will be directed to us. If you have a question for a particular member of the panel, please indicate who that is. And please keep in mind that our panelists' answers are their professional opinions based on facts or knowledge and reach through reasoning or analysis and should not be considered fact or the views of any of the represented companies. This session will be recorded and will be available upon request. I've asked Brian to get the discussion underway with a brief overview, history of lighting control with a focus on dimming technologies. Brian, take her away.
Thanks, Jim. Controls have finally come of age, largely thanks to energy code and expanding lighting fixture requirements. From the origins of basic switch, contactors, and relays to basic phase and fluorescent dimming in the 60s, the 80s brought us DMX, motion sensors, and more sophisticated relay panels. 0 to 10 ballast became widely used in the 90s, and dolly was invented. 0 to 10 has now become the standard in the US, while Europe and most of the rest of the world have embraced dolly. And now the latest technologies deploy PoE, Power over Ethernet, apps, and the cloud. So dimming controls are no longer confined to conference rooms and auditoriums. Energy code has driven time-based controls, occupancy sensors, and vacancy sensors, and daylight harvesting. Controllable LEDs, like tunable white and color changing systems, have added more advanced requirements. And now with the proliferation of smartphones and the internet, end users are demanding more. With all this technology, what's the right technology for your project? Jim, you want to get us started, please?
Thank you, Brian. Brian has reinforced what we already know. Lighting control without dimming is no longer an option. It's a necessity, even a requirement. So my questions will focus on the dimming technologies that Brian just mentioned: phase, 0 to 10 volt, dolly, and DMX. Audience, feel free to weigh in with questions covering any aspects of the lighting control. Again, please use the Teams chat and we'll be able to get them here. Let's start out the question session with our electrical contractor to get a feel for the preferences in the field. Steve, considering each of these technologies, phase, 0 to 10, DMX, and dolly, do you prefer one of these technologies over the other from an install viewpoint?
Thanks, Jim. From our standpoint as installers, typically we're coming in somewhat towards the end of the game. We've had engineers and consultants already discussing with the customers what their needs are, and hopefully that has been, zeroed in on, and that's what they do. So we really don't have a preference as the type of dimming. What we do have a preference for, though, however, is the manufacturers and the robustness, if you will, of the technology as well as the products. So we count on firms such as yourselves, CLW, as manufacturers reps, to provide the strong engineering and manufacturing companies that we use in the field, because we're responsible on a warranty side of things when something goes wrong. We haven't specified it. Certainly we've purchased it, although maybe that was done directly by the customer, but now we need to provide warranty services for it. So it's important to us to have something where the technology is got a history to it, and the brands, the manufacturers are strong, that'll stand behind us, because it will be costly for us to do any type of warranty repairs or changes.
Thanks, Steve. It was very kind of you to mention the fact that it's a partnership in going into this whole thing between the type of clients that need controls, the design community, the manufacturers and the reps, and of course the installers. So very nice of you. I have a question for you about kind of I guess the oldest technology of this group. Do you feel that phase dimming is still a viable technology?
We still run into a lot of phase dimming, typically on the decorative side. Your linears and everything else, mostly 0 to 10. But and personally, I have done for the past 20 years or so a lot of hospitality work. So you've got chandeliers, you've got the one-off fixtures that are above a particular table or desk or whatever. So we do still see a need on the phase dimming side. Some of that, I will admit, over the past maybe 5 years, I've seen some of those go 0 to 10, but usually when we talk to people that manufacture and say, gee, can you get us a 0 to 10 ballast in there instead, it really sets them in the wrong direction. That is not what they decided to do. And so we do see a good amount of the phase in the decorative side of things.
I know what you're talking about with the decorative products. It's oftentimes seems like there is no other advantage there's no way to move on to something else from that. So other than that, are there any circumstances when you maybe stop and suggest a change of technology over phase when it's specified?
Well, typically, again, like I stated earlier, the engineers and consultants, they're well aware of what's out there and what they feel is important and pertinent to the customer's needs. And as I said before, our needs are really, it's driven by what the customer wants, what they need for the project. And I'll say in everything else in our life, we don't really know what kind of technology we need until someone comes out and says, here, this is the latest, greatest thing. Guess what? You should be considering this. So it's really, again, that usually comes to us via the customers. And frankly, what we're seeing a lot of now on the customer side are more of a management, energy management, integration with building automation systems, that type of thing. And we tend to see that more readily now. And I think that will be an everyday occurrence, just as LEDs were exotic at one point in time. Everybody uses them now. Same thing. I think the measuring of your energy usage is going to become a greater factor in all of our lives, and certainly our customers.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, Steve. I will actually be getting back to some of the points that you just mentioned, maybe end users' thoughts or directions in the future. So as Arnold said, I'll be back. All right, next in line, Dave, how you doing? I'm hoping you can shed a little light, pun intended, on a question that has puzzled me for some time now. No, this is not about my hairline. Despite Dolly's status of being the industry standard in Europe, it's really been slow to catch on in North America. Do you have an opinion as to why that might be?
Jim, thanks for the opportunity to chat with you today. First of all, yes, your hairline, if you'd thrown on a Halloween wig or something, I might have had a comment, but we can avoid that for the day. So, of course, I'm an engineer. I have an opinion on everything. And my opinion on Dolly is probably similar to the opinion that quite a few other people have out there in North America. And so why has Dolly not caught on? Well, Dolly wasn't the greatest solution, I felt, when it first came out. Dolly 2.0 came out quite a long time ago, actually. I don't know if it's 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, but it's been a while now, and added a lot of capability. But what happened in our market in North America with the manufacturers is that we did not see enough prevalence and availability of product. And here in the US, it seems to be kind of all about the easy button. So if we want to push that easy button and have a product package that we can put together that works well with Steve, for example, on the construction side, we'd like to not have multiple technologies over and over again inside the building in order to be able to have all the control mechanisms that we may want. And so 0 to 10 really was adopted fairly quickly by many of the North American manufacturers, and we had a lot of flexibility. And again, it wasn't that there was no Dolly product, but if I wanted to go to something decorative, as Steve talked about, or if I wanted to go to anything that was a little bit outside the box of a very large production line, it was a little bit more difficult for us to get that Dolly product. And so that is the reason that we really look at it and say, Dolly's not been here yet, but it's still around. So that doesn't mean it's not coming.
Very good. Another question about Dolly for you. Does it solve any of today's system design challenges? Have any advantages in any specific areas over the other technologies?
Yeah, I think it solves some challenges. The biggest challenge that we really have is we need to get it adopted so that we have it available for across the package that we'd like to put together for a project. But many different things can be done, whether it's 0 to 10 or Dolly or DMX, as you go through the different technologies. There's a lot of capability in all of those. Can I get a DMX system to kind of do many of the things with Dolly? Absolutely. Can it do everything? No. So if I look at some of the different products and availability, as Brian had brought up, boy, we have this Internet of Things happening and PoE and all these other pieces. So as those pieces all come into play, Dolly has its place if we have the right amount of product. And so whether we're looking at reading fixtures energy use or some other things that we might not have, so there may be some things that we might want to get out of it. And when we talk about big data and the fact that big data is drawing dollars and research and funding mechanisms, some facilities may have a use then. And if we see those uses and are able to communicate that with those clients, we may be able to see adoption of Dolly in the right market to help grow its prevalence in the US.
Great. You've kind of addressed my next question to you already a little bit, but perhaps you have a little more to say about it. How important is it that controls are able to cross-communicate between disciplines?
The ability to cross-communicate is absolutely paramount, and we have some very good standardization that has occurred in other parts of the market. So if we go to building automation systems and the BACnet protocol and how well it communicates, and it's not perfect, there's no system that's perfect, but whether you're working through a JACE controller or some other pieces to help maybe take a proprietary communication signal that couldn't be adopted to the BACnet protocol, our hope would be that there is a great white box that shows up that you plug everything into, and out of it, it speaks whatever you want. So if I want to get energy management data, I might not get it from 0 to 10, but I can pull some of it from the Dolly. I can talk thermostats, I can talk lighting, and I can integrate all that together. And I do think it's coming. We just need to push that easy button soon so that we can have all that integrated together. But I would agree and say that it's incredibly important to integrate as much of that data and technology as possible.
Thank you, Dave. I'm a big proponent of the easy button and the great white boxes myself. Appreciate the answers. Deb, it's time to turn to you for some questions. If you're ready for me, I'd like to jump into DMX. DMX just seems to keep on keeping on, despite the rumblings that it's an older technology and that it has limitations. When do you normally go to DMX as your first choice?
Thanks, Jim. I have to say that DMX is not typically my first choice for control systems. It certainly has its place when we're looking at color changing things, or when we're looking at really long distances that we need to communicate. That's when I would even start considering DMX. But most of the time we're looking at, Dolly or 0 to 10 or some sort of networked system outside of that communication protocol. It's kind of specialized, I think, to the color changing and where you need a fixture that needs multiple lines of communication.
I see. So it kind of has a place, I'm hearing from you. So let's talk about, you mentioned like long distances and color, changing colors. So some of the things that it does well. Do you feel you've run into obstacles when you've tried to use DMX in the past?
Well, sure. It's expensive, right? The cables are bigger, they take up more space, they require larger conduits. So if we can get the functionality out of Dolly or some of these more advanced digital systems that we could get with DMX, I would see a game changer in making that more affordable to have color changing on your projects, for sure. But yeah, the cables and the conduit size really drive up the price on that stuff.
Yes, it really does. The bill of materials can get scary sometimes on that stuff. But let's move on to a little more specifics about what you mean by color changing. Are you talking about strictly about RGB, or is there more to it than that?
Yes, when I say color changing, I generally mean RGB or RGBW. Tunable white is the term I would use for the tunable white fixtures we're seeing, and we see control applications where you can use 2 channels of 0 to 10 volt to control that. We've seen control applications where you can use a digital system over a Cat5 cable and link up multiple fixtures that way, as opposed to the thicker DMX, cable type solution.
Very good. Thank you, Deb. I see those post-nominal letters definitely belong after your name. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
But I'm not done with you yet. I'll be back.
Okay.
Well, now for the moment that you've all been waiting for, my closing questions. These are for the entire group, and we'll work our way from, in my screen, we'll work our way from left to right. How's that sound? So that puts us back with Steve first again. Let's look into our crystal balls. Tell me what technologies and features, especially, I think, will still be valid in 5 years, and which do you think will be widely used in, say, 10 years from now? Let's start with Steve. Steve?
Thanks, Jim. For the run-of-the-mill projects, nothing exotic, nothing strange. 0 to 10 is still there. I don't see that going away anytime soon. The phase dimming, of course. We're seeing more of the wireless aspects coming in as far as controls. And believe it or not, even though we're installers and we get paid to install, wireless is, we even find in the field that they say, wow, this is great. We, screw it on the ceiling and we're done, kind of a thing. So that it's gaining some notoriety. As far as the future, I'll lean a little bit towards, call it the financial world. There's both socially, culturally, there's this movement for ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. And what that is about going to task with corporations, with companies, and saying, okay, here's your footprint. All right, what do you do to my earth with your footprint? And so measurement of these ESG factors has becoming a big thing. And from our perspective, and what we all do in the lighting world, is I just think that ESG movement is going to push even faster call it the proliferation of use of the integration of our lighting controls and our data gathering of the energy usage into an overall building automation system. We've had a few requests from developers for those types of things, and frankly, we've searched to find one call. You guys are talking about the easy button. We're looking for that easy button where somebody says, yeah, we can do it all. It's not quite, we're not there yet. We can't get it where the mechanical and the electrical and everybody else is all working together. But with technology that we have today, I see that in the very near future, actually, becoming, someone's going to come out and say, we can do it all. And I think that's going to really affect us. And it might be nothing more than a Cat5 cable going to that black box on the wall reporting data, but it will become a part of the design scheme when it comes to lighting and controls.
Thank you, Steve. I see you must have watched the inauguration yesterday.
No, I didn't. I don't know if they talked about it.
I think we'll be hearing a lot about ESG with the change. So let's move on. Dave, can you look into your crystal ball for us?
Oh, good.
Am I, oh, there I am. Okay. I absolutely, you're
Sorry.
wondering, am I going to look or am I not? Absolutely,
Yeah,
I'm
that
going to
hung for a
look.
moment. Sorry about that.
That's all right. So my first response would be, as we're talking about the easy buttons, will we have an integrated solution in 5 years that talks and brings all these systems together? There's my answer. It's my easy.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's my easy button. It's a firm maybe. So I don't know if it'll be here that quickly. I don't think 0 to 10 is going anywhere. I think phase dimming will continue to slide and eventually fall away. I think DMX is here to stay, even though it's an older technology in theatrical and RGBW and some other places. I don't know that something else is going to want to take the cost structure in terms of moving into that location and that space and put something else in that, that really has a tried and true, very good method. Dolly, I think, is going to continue growing because of its data, and its two-way communication capability. It's just how fast that happens, and does it happen fast enough, or does something else come along and overtake it? I look at these things where, Virgin launches a rocket ship from a plane. SpaceX lands a rocket ship on a boat. We can do all these things, but we can't get our HVAC system to turn on and off and sense when somebody's in a room or not with a lighting sensor, so we need to have a second sensor in there. Now, some of those pieces are starting to get tied together, but I really do think that there is going to be this system that's going to be in place that's going to allow multiple protocols to communicate together in order to allow us to have a viable, easy-to-use solution that works really through the whole process, because we need to be able to understand the product that's available from the manufacturers and work with them. The designers and engineers need to be able to specify the product so that it makes sense and works. The installers need to be able to take all of that data and say, yes, this is a system that really truly does work and isn't sitting there scratching their heads 11 months later because they're still getting calls back, because I know Steve does not want that. So
No, thank you.
The hope is 5 years from now to 10 years from now, we have a integrated solution. Perhaps Dolly is a part of it, or maybe there's a Dolly 3.0 that talks with the other pieces too, with some head-end equipment. And I think that will also include a lot more wireless product. Wireless is getting closer and closer to having better communication capability with the low energy Bluetooth, with some of the different mesh products. And it's not still perfected, and we still have a few issues, but I think that's going to be a bigger part in our lives in the relatively near future as well.
Super, thanks, Dave. A lot of information. Appreciate that a lot. Not only does Steve on his end not like the callbacks way down the road with the manufacturers and the agencies that he's working with as well, don't like those either, so we try to avoid them. Deb, it's your turn to look into your crystal ball. What do you see as far as technologies and needs go, features that are going to be requested and or required in the next 5 years to 10?
Sure. I do want to reiterate a lot of what David said. He made a lot of great points about connectivity and intercommunication. And I think we are going to see more and more networked systems, with a smart capability where we get that energy data out, where we get the energy management piece of it and the maintenance communication piece of it. When I talk to owners, they all love the idea, if they can afford it, right? That always seems to be a hang up. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I think we're going to see the energy code pushing us towards being able to top trim, being able to have demand reduction. It's in there as an option now, but so was dimming daylight harvesting for a while, and now that's required. So I think we're going to see the energy code push us more towards these types of systems. And I also think really far out, but maybe not so far out, is self-learning AI systems for buildings, where that AI system works with the HVAC, where it works with the lighting, and has its own probably algorithm built around this one building, and how does it work, and can we trim off a little bit of savings here and there by turning on our boilers 2 minutes later or 5 minutes later, and can we reduce the time wait on these lights from 20 minutes to 10 to 3 because of what they learned from the occupancy data. I think that might be a place this field is going that not too many people have thought of yet, for sure. As far as what end users might want, functionality that people might want in terms of interfacing with their buildings, Brian mentioned it earlier. Everyone walks around with a smart computer in their pocket. Why can't we use that to be our light switch? Why can't we use that to log into a conference room and bring up the lighting controls there, turn on the projector, lower the screen, all from the device that we're used to touching, that maybe we'll feel safer touching than we do spaces now, because I don't think this is the last pandemic I'm ever going to see in my lifetime. And how much is that going to play into interfaces and hospitality over the next few years? So those are my thoughts.
Deb, you've given us all a lot to think about there. I really love the AI thing. It's not something I would have thought about bringing up, but it's natural. I mean, why would it be restricted to only, robots and factories and automobiles going down the street without a driver in the driver's seat? It only makes sense after you say that. Can I borrow your crystal ball from you? I've got a couple questions about my life I'd like to ask it and see which direction I should be moving.
I don't physically have a crystal ball. I'm sorry, Jim. If I did, I would loan it to you.
All right. Well, Brian, we have any questions from the audience at this point?
Yes, Jim, I actually do. The first question is regarding wireless. What are your feelings on wireless dimming? Do you think in the future that will be the preferred method? So I throw that out to the panel. Anybody care to talk about wireless, Dave?
Actually, can I add a little bit to that question in that the biggest negative reaction I've had is oftentimes been from the end user. Of course, it's maybe because wireless is coming up late. So those same questions about wireless, but add the end user in there. I'd like to get your opinions on what feedback has been from end users. Do they have a stumbling block with the fact that they speak via Bluetooth or radio waves or whatever?
Dave, before we go to you, I just Jim and I kind of made a conscious decision when we put this panel together that wireless would probably be another subject for another day. But having said that, wireless is certainly proliferated. We have things like Bluetooth mesh and Zigbee and Wi-Fi, and there's all kinds of proprietary wireless signals out there. So let's just touch on that for one more second, and let's get your thoughts on that, Dave.
Brian, you hit it on the head. The fact that it's proliferated out there. The big comments that we are getting from the end users are, is this reliable? Is it going to work? And is it going to work every time? And the unfortunate answer today is no. Now, when they say, does it work every time? I think the response is not that it works most of the time or pretty much most of the time, but it almost works all the time. And typically when it doesn't work, it's that there is a unique circumstance that's in place that you can usually overcome. And so it needs to be a conversation with that end user to help them understand the fact that wireless today is far different, just like LEDs. Wireless today is far different than it was 5 years ago, and it'll continue to improve through the next 5 years. And so I think that you are probably correct that we're going to see a higher proliferation of wireless, and my hope would be that same, interconnected communication device or system or software, maybe that's on our smartphone in our pocket, will also have the ability to communicate with whichever of those systems out there are operating as wireless.
Very good, Jim. Dave, very good. So I think you've hit that right on the head with the wireless, and it may be that some wireless protocol overtakes Dolly. But I do have a question about Dolly and some of the more recent Dolly 2.0, 209 standards. And I know, Deb, you've been involved with some of this, but can you talk about the new Dolly standard with multiple control channels? And do you know much about the 5-channel standard that is reported to replace DMX?
I have not read those standards backwards and forwards and inside out, so I don't know that I can answer the questions. I do know that it's critical to make sure that everything is Dolly 2.0 or 2.09 moving forward, so that you don't have any issues in the field of things not talking to one another. I'm very excited about the multiple channels of communication function of that, which I think is really going to help make tunable white more affordable for people to be able to put in. So that's an exciting part of it. But no, I can't speak to the 5-channel one, Brian.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, no, that's all right. I've kind of glanced over the standards. I'm certainly no expert on the subject. It's my understanding, and if anyone else has a comment on this, that standard was published along with the 2-channel Dolly standard. So for any of our listeners, the latest Dolly 2.0 standard 209 allows you to set a CCT and a separate intensity control channel on one Dolly address. And the promise is that we'll have at least RGB, W, and maybe up to 6 channels across a single Dolly address in the future. But I don't think there's any product out there right now that does that. So, sometimes they set standards to try to push the industry along, and I think that's probably what's happened with that 5-channel standard. But, we may be seeing that coming to color change. I do think that Dolly is going to pick up some steam, but it may be overcome by wireless, in my opinion. I did have a question. I haven't heard of any, but have any of our panelists heard of any wireless Dolly controls coming out in the future? No? Okay.
No.
None here.
Nope.
Yeah, me neither. All right, so let's move away from Dolly. I did get a question. What are your thoughts on PoE, Power over Ethernet? Has anyone engaged with one of those projects?
Mhm.
I see some head shaking. Dave, you want to make a comment on
Sure.
Power over Ethernet?
We have engaged with the Power over Ethernet, and the PoE is really not just limited to lighting and lighting fixtures. So there's some fun things that you were able to play with. Now, we have not been able to get a large project off of the start point, if you will, but we've had a number of test projects out there that have worked with PoE in terms of powering not only, we're trying to get a system together that can actually fully communicate with cameras, with sensors, with lights, all working together. And I will tell you that it's an interesting technology with the capacity that they continue increasing the power over Ethernet standards with, where we're putting more and more power availability through it. I think it's becoming more able to be utilized in more environments than just a fun, unique conference setting or whatever that particular use might be. So yeah, I would say stay tuned for more of that, because I think that it's going to continue coming.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your comments on that. I tend to agree. I think PoE is certainly an interesting technology. A number of manufacturers out there touting that, and I think we've had a challenge in Chicago because of our conduit and box rules. Most of these manufacturers put the RJ45 directly on the back of the fixture, and that makes it difficult to put in a Chicago plenum situation. But I think we're going to see more solutions to that coming down the pipe. All right, I have, just as a reminder to any of our attendees out there, we seem to have lost our chat function. So if you do have a question, I think you all have my email at this point. I have, I think, just one more question here. If anyone has a question, send me a quick email and we'll get it on the board. The last question that I have is kind of a two-parter. With COVID, and when we are moving back into offices, have you seen a push for no contact controls? For example, do you see people moving away from touch points like wall switches? Dave, you are up.
I'm sure that Steve and Deb may have some input too on what they've been hearing, but we have not been hearing so much as elimination of those touch points as the ability to add other technologies. So we've ended up having people that have said, hey, can we replace all of our light switches with product that might have silver ions and that kind of thing on it, so that nothing can grow. So a lot of the stuff that we take from our hospital settings, we've been getting some questions of that in places that I did not expect. The other thing that, as we talk about this future piece and having our smartphones, the other piece that we have heard from folks is, do we have the ability with the product that we've put in? So a few folks have said, hey, we spent this money on lighting controls that we put in a year and a half ago. Can we integrate everybody in the office's cell phones to this so we can control it? The unfortunate answer typically to that is not unless you spend some more money, which hasn't had it move off that base yet, but it's not been significant prevalence for us. It's just been a few people that have been asking the questions.
Yeah, I'll put my two cents in this, and then I think we're about done. Deb, you have a comment as well. We'll come back to you in just a second. I have had a few people wanting to eliminate the vacancy sensors. They want to go back to auto on, auto off, and at the moment, the code does not allow for that. There are certain areas that you can use auto on, auto off, like corridors and restrooms. But when you're in private offices, conference rooms, those kind of spaces, the code's pretty clear in having vacancy sensors. So Deb, did you want to add something to this question?
I did. I was just going to say that we haven't gotten that request yet.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting to see, I think with the development of, COVID isn't really transferred versus surfaces as much as we thought at the beginning. And it's more an aerosolized item that we may not actually see that push. It'll be interesting to see where the conversation is in 6 months and a year when we are back in the offices.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's something that came up early on. All right. Well, Jim, do you have some final comments here so we can let everybody get on with their day?
Yeah, I sure do. I have a little wrap up. Thank you all very much. That is it for dimming and contractors and time clocks. Oh my. Want to thank you all very much for attending and participating. All of our panelists, Steve Wierma of Continental Electric, Deborah Stamel-Claire of Premier Engineers, Dave Janney of Millie's Engineering, and of course my associate Brian Coddington of Chicago Lightworks. We are planning a series of these, so you'll all be getting additional invitations and maybe requests for positions on a panel. So keep a lookout for those. I'm Jim Westerfield, and for Chicago Lightworks, I'd like to thank you and wish you all a good day.